We are in the middle of some pretty historic times right now. And I don't say that in the meaningless sort of way. Oh, it's historic. The longest war for the United States is ending. And in some sense, it has ended in the last few hours. Joe Biden announcing, as well as Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, that the United States has flown its final flight out of Afghanistan, where the United States has been for 20 years. There are now some images that may become iconic or emblematic in some sense as we go forward. The Associated Press reporting that the last troops have exited Afghanistan, ending America's longest war. There is this image, this night vision image of a military service member provided to the Associated Press boarding a C-17 cargo plane at the airport in Kabul yesterday, considered the final American service member to depart Afghanistan. Now, in reality, there's usually always some caveats, like there's probably still a few there that are maybe in a less official capacity or not in uniform, or you never know. You guys understand what I'm saying. But the point here is Joe Biden is officially getting the United States out, expected to address the nation later today. I plan to cover it live on YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook. And the top line here is that this is a major accomplishment. The Associated Press writing, the U.S. has completed its withdrawal from Afghanistan, ending America's longest war and closing a chapter in military history likely to be remembered for colossal failures, unfulfilled promises, and a frantic final exit that cost the lives of more than 180 Afghans and 13 U.S. service members, some barely older than the war. Now, there are many who want to argue that means that it was wrong to leave, but it's really important to understand that if you go in a harebrained, ill-thought-out way, as George W. Bush did, and you remain for 2 decades as failures continue to mount and you fail to achieve really almost anything other than the temporary suppression of the Taliban, why would we assume getting out is going to go swimmingly? In other words, it doesn't follow logically. If it was a disaster to get in and it was a disaster while we were there, is it a reasonable expectation to think that the exit is going to be ginger snaps and waterfalls? Now, I'm not being coy about the fact that lives were lost in getting out in the same way that lives were lost while there. It's been some time since American lives were lost while there, but Afghan lives have continued to be lost there, and Afghan lives will likely continue to be lost there after our departure. But the top line is that this is a major accomplishment in that the big arc is George W. Bush got us in. It was a disaster. It was a quagmire. Barack Obama failed to get us out. Donald Trump failed to get us out. And Joe Biden has gotten us out. I'm not pretending that the rest is irrelevant. It's not. It's people's lives. There are things that could have been done better. And that applies to the entire time we were there and getting in the first place. That's not unique to Joe Biden. But the big picture is, in 10 years and 20 years and 30 years, what is the story of the war in Afghanistan? Obviously, much of the story remains to be told, and it'll depend on what happens during that period of time. But the arc is George W. Bush got us in 2001. We stayed for 20 years. What the hell were we doing? And then Joe Biden got us out. That's the big story. And it is not a story that is being told in that clear terminology in too many places. Now, there are some that will write in and say, David, it's not being told in that clear terminology because it's not that clear and it's far more complicated. I'm with you. I'm not pretending there isn't complexity here, but those are the big points. A little bit more from this Associated Press article. Hours before President Joe Biden's Tuesday deadline for shutting down a final airlift and thus ending the U.S. war, Air Force transport planes carried a remaining contingent of troops from Kabul airport late Monday. Thousands of troops had spent a harrowing 2 weeks protecting the airlift of tens of thousands of Afghans, Americans, and others seeking to escape a country once again ruled by Taliban militants. In announcing the completion of the evacuation and war effort, General Frank McKenzie, head of U.S. Central Command, said the last planes took off from Kabul airport at 3:29 p.m. Washington time, or 1 minute before midnight in Kabul. He said some American citizens, likely numbering in the very low hundreds, were left behind, and he believes they will still be able to leave the country. Secretary of State Antony Blinken put the number of Americans left behind at under 200, likely closer to 100, and said the State Department would keep working to get them out. He praised the military-led evacuation as heroic and said the U.S. diplomatic presence would shift to Doha, Qatar. Jake Sullivan, Biden's NSA, said Tuesday the mission to get Americans out of Afghanistan continues. Biden was set to address the nation on Afghanistan later Tuesday. We will cover that, as I mentioned. Biden said in a written statement Monday, military commanders unanimously favored ending the airlift, not extending it. He said he asked Blinken to coordinate with international partners in holding the Taliban to their promise of safe passage for Americans and others who want to leave in the days ahead. This is a very important thing. This is the right decision. This was an unwinnable intervention. And the fact that, listen, everything we've seen happen in these 2 weeks proves that we shouldn't be there. The Taliban so quickly taking over control. ISIS so quickly getting in and doing a suicide bombing. These are not reasons to stay. These are reasons to leave. And it doesn't mean we don't care about the people there. But the U.S. simply can't be the world's policeman. A situation that depends on our military presence in Afghanistan indefinitely because of George W. Bush's harebrained decision is untenable. And this is correct. I believe history will bear that out with much tragedy in the meantime. There is no denying that whatsoever. And what I want to talk about next is what's happening with Joe Biden's approval rating, partially because of Afghanistan, but mostly not. If you ever feel like you just don't have enough time to read all the books you want to read, you have to check out one of my favorite apps called Blinkist. Blinkist takes thousands of popular nonfiction books and distills each one down into an ebook or audiobook that you can get through in just 15 minutes, where you're getting all the key takeaways from the book. Just imagine how you'll be able to expand your horizons and knowledge by being able to soak up all of the important insights from 10 different books in an afternoon. Obviously, it's perfect for exposing yourself to a new book you otherwise wouldn't have time for, or you can use it to revisit a book you've already read, or use it to preview a book before you buy the full version and read it. I recently read A Brief History of Time, of course, by the great Stephen Hawking. This is a book that I have been aware of for so long, and other things got in the way. And it was fantastic to check it out on Blinkist. Blinkist has books on politics, philosophy, science. They have 27 different nonfiction categories, and a subscription is only about $8 a month, and you get the entire library. But you can try it totally free and get 25% off a subscription when you go to Blinkist.com/Pacman. I've put the link right underneath this video.